What is up, YouTube? How you doing? This is another episode of Comrades Corner. It's your boy Project Nerd HQ and my guy from the Aussie, the land across the pond, my brother Nick. What's up, baby?
Hey, how are you? It's been another interesting week. Lots happening in Australian politics, lots happening in American politics. Maybe the end of the Reagan era. We can only hope.
You only wish. No, but a lot has been going on, especially over here in the States with like the stimulus package getting passed and, people looking forward to that and just different talks when it comes, to the minimum wage and just different issues. The same thing, just different day. Right, Nick?
Yes and no. I think there's an element of I guess Biden is surprising, and he's been surprising this whole way through, right? I think it's really interesting in the primary a year ago or 13, 14 months ago. We were all for, well, where am I here? We were all for this man, Mr. Bernard Sanders. And I remember there was, after Sanders dropped out, there was a discussion on Zero Books about what it meant and how, it meant that if Bernie had won, how it meant that the Democratic Party as a constituted party, because what the Democratic Party had been constituted through over time was not at all represented by Bernie. He represented a distinct change. And I remember watching The Circus, which is the Showtime political show, and they had a clip of Joe Biden after Iowa, and he had been thoroughly defeated in Iowa. But he just said this, it's a long campaign and I'm going to win, with a lot of confidence. And, I guess he was right to have that confidence in the end. But that kind of, the man from Delaware in the primaries became the man from, wherever it is. Where's the office set?
Vermont?
No, not Vermont. Just outside of New York. Where did he grow up?
Oh, in Brooklyn.
No.
Yeah, he grew up in Brooklyn.
Biden.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you talked about Bernie. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, Biden.
Biden's office is I think it's in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but the Ricky Gervais show, The Office, the US version, set in the hometown where Biden actually grew up. And
Scranton. Yeah,
Scranton. And so in the general election, and since, it's almost like the man from Scranton rather than the man from Delaware. Now, with the exception of debt recovery protection, because we both know that Biden believes in debt as a holy sacrament that must be paid back. But that, look, no one's perfect, and I think that the right-wing noise of affirmation that Biden can't string a sentence together is projection about, Trump,
of course.
for sure. But it does allow Biden to come in and always overshoot expectations when he does actually speak. Like when he was saying that it's time, but he was saying that trickle down economics doesn't work. That's amazing to think about. After 50 years of Washington consensus abroad, neoliberalism at home, and the kind of anti-union ethos that has been not only an American ethos, but has been an international ethos. And how far you want to go with that depends on how comfortable, I guess, you are with and what kind of discernment you have in terms of things like history and geopolitical struggles over broader, longer periods of time, and potentially even conspiracy analysis. Because I'm waiting on a book called The Jakarta Method which Michael
Okay.
Brooks had definitely lauded shortly before his sad passing. Um, and there's some other books in that vein. I think Rick Perlman has done a really good job over the course of his career of sort of from Nixon land to his more recent works, charting this political philosophy. But Biden came out as a part of his announcement and said we need to rebuild this economy from the ground up and from the middle out,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that everyone has to pay their fair share. And that is, that's words, right? And y- it's easy to be cynical because we've heard these words before, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we've seen people who could have done a very good job of representing this in a more incrementalist manner get wiped out, whether it's the caucus or Al Gore. Um, you know, and I have this crazy idea that if Mitt Romney had beaten Barack Obama in 2012, the world would be a better place because there'd be no Trump. Um, and I sometimes wonder about that, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that this package, in all its 1.9 trillion dollars worth, could be the beginning of a new perspective on governance, not just the government, but on the methods and the processes of governance, which is desperately needed. And we will see. I mean, it's really going to come down to a 15-round bout now between Biden and Rupert Murdoch. Um, and we know that in Australia, there's no one. We got former prime ministers Kevin Rudd and Malcolm Turnbull, who are really banging the pots and making a lot of noise um, against Rupert Murdoch and highlighting by putting all the different papers around this country on the screen at once and showing how they're running the exact same story with the exact same right-wing bias, with the exact same, like we got politicians being accused, credibly accused of rape, talking about cancel culture.
Yeah.
I mean, which brings us to Cuomo, who's doing the same
Mm-hmm.
shit, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so there are positives and negatives from the week that since we last spoke.
No, no, definitely, definitely. There's positives and there are negatives. Like you're saying, like the issue with Cuomo, it needs to be addressed and it needs to be called out, and he needs to step down. The same thing like Jim Jordan from Ohio, that needs to be addressed and he needs to step down. And it goes on to like everyone else that's a part of the political climate that has allegations against them. These are credible allegations, but they're speaking about Potato Head being canceled, or they're speaking about, Pepe Le Pew being canceled, but they're not coming to the table when it talks about getting money to American people. They literally lied on the Senate floor and said that undocumented immigrants were getting stimulus checks and people in jail was getting, which is an absolute lie. And
Yeah, but
it's
here's my question: who cares? Let's say for a second that they were. Who cares?
Mhm,
Who cares, right? You're talking about a country, America, right? The United States of America, with 320 million people in it, right? And I know you have the biggest numbers in incarceration in the world, both per capita and absolute,
mhm.
which is shocking and disgusting.
Yeah,
Why is it that if you commit a felony, even if it's something really bad, right? Why is it that then you're just wiped out? You have no chance of being a member of society again. Don't we believe in redemption? Isn't the rule of law about redemption? Why shouldn't prisoners be getting a stimulus check as well? You know,
exactly.
undocumented or illegal immigrants. I mean, look, from whose perspective, right?
Hmm.
So, it's like you may as well get on the Senate floor and say we don't care about people in Puerto Rico, which would be true. That would not
Hmm.
be a lie.
Yeah,
Um, it's ridiculous, and I think that these issues, and especially immigration, is something that has resonance now because we have such a gap in wealth inequality. If we had a much smaller gap in wealth inequality, I don't think people would fall for it as easily. And you know, we can go back to periods when the wealth inequality was much smaller. But for Christ's sakes, I mean, America, like Australia, is built by immigration. As it's currently constituted, is it you know, it's not Native American politicians getting up there and saying illegal immigrants are getting these funds, right? And to that point, Biden, in his speech, addressed people from a national perspective, from a state perspective, and from a tribal perspective. He included the tribes. I mean, this is big. This is big, and it's positive. And there's a lot to criticize about Biden, and there's a lot to criticize about Biden's administration. But the thing is that Biden is a team player, and he's wanting to create circumstances in which people can live. I mean, look, I've seen the food lines. You know, I've seen those videos, those drone shots.
There's literally of every Friday across the street from my house, I'll take a video of food line that literally circles around the block from the local mosque that's literally around the corner from me.
And people, you know, look, as a sociologist, I say the scariest word in sociology is hunger, because once you have hunger, everything becomes unpredictable. And the idea of sociology is predictability. And it's not individual predictability, it's group predictability. So when you think of any system, any process, you should be able to predict how the outcome is going to be distributed. And it is a distributed outcome, right? You can't set up a one size fits all, where if you follow the Ben Shapiro steps to success, get a degree, get a full-time job, get married, and have a kid, you will be happy and content and own a 4-bedroom, $450,000 house in the suburbs of New York. It's not going to happen, right? Even if everybody did get a college degree and did get married and did have kids, you know, you're going to have distributed outcomes. Some people are going to fail their degree. Some people are going to fail their marriage. Some people are going to fail and damage their kids. So as a sociologist and as someone interested in governance, we need to look after those elements where, you know, we're one sigma away from the center of the mean, where things are much messier and much more difficult. And that includes people in prison. They deserve a chance. And if we take everything away from them and say, no, you're not a citizen, so you can't get a stimulus check, even if they can't spend it, right? It just has to sit in their bank account until their parole date. And then say their parole date is 25 years from now. So they get out and inflation's just eaten all of it. And it's like the same as having $50.
Yeah.
Why not? What is the cost? It's very marginal.
No, I totally agree with you. I'm totally on board with you on that. We definitely have to look at our prison industrial complex and see how we rehab people instead of punishing people. That's something that has to be fixed. The same way how we handle the homeless here in America has to be fixed, in the same way how we handle the poor when it comes to social safety nets. All of that has to be fixed. But what I was saying is that the hypocrisy and just it doesn't get anything done. All it does is get clickbait so that, you know, stupid ass conservatives could just copy and paste videos to put on their Facebook and create memes. It gets nothing done and it solves anything. That's the only thing that I was saying. I totally agree with you with every point that you said afterwards when it came to like stuff that needs to be fixed and addressed.
Right, but I mean that whole meme industrial complex is a direct result of Donald Trump. And I think if we think back to 2015 and we think about like, okay, let's look at the Trump era. It's so complexly dark that it's hard to really fathom if there are any positives at all. And the positive was it was a break in the neoliberal cycle.
Hold on. I'm sorry, Nick. It's someone trying to join the chat. This is a friend of mine's, Chop Low. Chop, what's up, baby? Can't hear you. You're muted. You're muted.
God bless, salute. I didn't even know. I just want to chime in and say salute and God bless both of you brothers.
Thank you, Chop. Appreciate you coming through, baby.
You know, I got to represent for my dude, the HQ.
I feel you.
What is this?
I'm gonna be in the back. He gonna have me cooking in the back. I'm in the back.
Copy. Say in the back, Chop. No, that's his that's his catchphrase that he does whenever he comes into the chat. That's chop low. He's actually
I
a
like
cook
it.
too. He does a lot of cooking when we're on panel shows. He gets us hungry a lot, showing us what he's chefing up. Thank you, Chop, for stopping through. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. So, that break in the neoliberal cycle that Trump represented, I think he got a huge boost in enthusiasm. And look, I mean, we've done this to death. This has played out. The whole Bernie would have won 2016 argument. And potentially it's true, right? Potentially it's true. I heard Crystal Ball in a clip, and the New Abnormal, the Daily Beast podcast covered this book as well. There's a new book out behind the scenes of the 2020 election. And Crystal Ball's comment is this could have been called "Let's Stop Bernie, Let's Derail the Bernie Campaign," and to the point where Hillary Clinton was almost tempted to jump in, right, which would have made Alex Jones's dreams beyond wild, right? That's what he was rooting for more than anything else. A redo of Trump v. Clinton, right?
Yeah.
But part of the reason for that, I think, from a broader, almost a mythological perspective, is that by the time Hillary Clinton had a clear path to run and win the Democratic National Convention and the nomination, neoliberalism had been crystallized down to an extreme art, right? There was no regulation left to D. There was no shore left to off. There was no source left to out. And so we're stuck in this period now. Do you remember 2013 when she was arguing like, how good is it that we have the gig economy and we have to protect the gig economy?
It's laughable.
Yeah, I mean, go down to Besna, Alabama, and tell them that we need to protect the gig economy.
Yeah,
right?
but that's the history of neoliberalism. It's just highlighting specific social issues, but not addressing the core issue or changing the material status that's going to address what's going on. Actually, they could virtue signal for like for social issues, but they're not changing anything that's going on. The same thing like you pointed out with Hillary Clinton talking about we have to protect the gig economy. How can you say that when you literally like busted out unions and try to destroy unions your whole time while you was in political office?
Well, I mean, and that was her point, is that we need the gig economy to discipline the labor force in order to maintain the kind of system that we've built. And the system that we've built is a system that makes the wealthy obscenely wealthy. And this is producing homelessness, right?
Yeah. when you talk about like I'm sorry, systems in place, the housing market, and we spoke about that when that.
Oh no, I can't hear you. Have I dropped out? Am I still here? I can't hear you. Shit.
No, that's me. That's my fault. I unplugged my mic by accident. You were still there. But what I was saying is, it's like when we discussed about housing markets and seeing that in the U.S., we don't recognize housing as a right, which it should be. That's why I live.
No, it's a commodity.
Yeah, it's a commodity. That's why I live in the Bronx in a horrible neighborhood, a 5-flight walk up, and I'm paying $1,300 a month in rent. It's disgusting.
And look, I mean, to that extent, I don't know what to say, because it's like at the same time you're living in the Bronx and we got a population of 10 million people on Manhattan Island, and there's only so much space there, right? So you're always going to have certain pressures when you're in the 5 boroughs of New York because of the just population density, and that even if housing was decommodified, that's still going to be something that you need a level of privilege, and it's going to come at a level of expense to maintain a lifestyle in New York.
Oh,
the broader
definitely that. But when you have like a homeless population of 60,000 in New York City, and then you have like I think it's 400 to 500,000 empty apartments in New York City, that That right there is a head
So
scratcher.
it's ridiculous. I mean, look, symbolically, what should be done, given Trump's taxes, given the Southern District of New York and I forget her name, but the Attorney General,
Yeah.
who is pushing pretty hard and has been pushing pretty hard to, wreak some justice on the Trump empire. I mean, symbolically, it would be great if Trump's luxury apartments that are sitting empty because his mates in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Ireland, want to park their cash to get out of their own tax jurisdictions or whatever it is, should be seized by the authorities in New York, and then it should be turned into emergency housing, crisis housing.
And just like somebody just said, but the system is designed. Absolutely. The system has been rigged for the
that's
people
what we're
at the
talking
top.
about. That's neoliberalism. That's the
Yeah.
Washington Consensus abroad.
And it's both Democrats and Republicans that do it. It's just Republicans do it more and do it more hideous. Democrats are at fault as well.
Well, I think, look, the cycle ended in 2007, right? When we had the beginnings and the global financial crisis took a year to fully play out, when between, what was it, Bear Stearns going down to Lehman going down, that was a long period of time, and the bazooka that Hank Paulson demanded that he needed to fire into the banks of Wall Street to maintain, because systemic risk had crept in and they didn't see it coming. Even though, by the way, for whatever the period of Alan Greenspan's time as the chair of the Federal Reserve, he was talking about how we had almost eliminated risk. Right, we had hedged so successfully that risk wasn't really something we worried about on Wall Street anymore. And then, bang, it all blows up. And so it's it ended then, because I think people saw that, and it takes time. These things take time to settle in. They don't happen. And so, along comes Barack Obama, who, if you're very kind of cruel, you may say he was neoliberalism in blackface. Now, I don't believe that to be the truth. I think that Barack Obama certainly represents a professional middle class constituency, and that to the extent that he was able to do certain things, he was bound by the fact that the Democratic Party as an institution was reliant on PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, Goldman Sachs to actually run the administration, right? And so there's not a lot you can do when you have to bring in as advisors executives from the banks you're trying to regulate. And I will agree with every person who stands there and said, in 2009, he had a choice. He could have said, bring me their heads on a silver platter and let's make an example of, Lord Blankfein and whoever else running the show down in Wall Street. And he probably should have done that. It was a mistake not to do that. But, that's so easy to say in hindsight. That's so easy to decade after Occupy Wall Street had the impact that it had. The reality is, 2016, no neoliberalist was going to be able to run and win, right? And that's what Hillary Clinton represented. So she was doomed from the start. The problem is you've got the inertia and the systems of power that had supported her for her entire career. And look, Rush
and
Limbaugh
a little
died recently.
entitlement as well. She literally had like a little entitlement factor as well, thinking that she had the crown, and everything automatically lined up for her. I
don't want to go that far, because look, the thing I was about to say is Rush Limbaugh. So we're getting all these post-mortems come out, like Robert Evans at Behind the Bastards and other groups who have done a good Mr. Limbaugh. But the reality is, like, he saw an opportunity to stoke up a fear about the Clinton family based on
nonsense,
certain rumors and things. Look, I've been to what is it, the Cena, Arkansas, the airport there. I've actually been there. We went there and we got chased out by security and some pretty vicious dogs. It was a terrifying experience, but there's two things can be true at once. Two analyses can be true at once, but then you can have a narrative that comes in to tie those two things together that is completely false. And so the whole thing of like, so and so was killed, or they killed themselves, or the Clinton body count nonsense is all noise added to signal. And so we get this situation.
Hold on, real quick, just so people know. Hold on. Z, what's up? Just so people know who we're talking about when it comes to Rush Limbaugh. I'm just gonna play a little snippet real quick, and then we could continue. Nick, my apologies. This is a little of the classics of Rush Limbaugh for people that don't know who Rush Limbaugh is. This is the person that poisoned the majority of old people in this country.
Folks, there's actually a debate going on ESPN and throughout the sports world over who can use the N-word, when and how, and who can't, when and how. A little history lesson for you. If any race of people should not have guilt about slavery, it's Caucasians. The white race has probably had fewer slaves and for a briefer period of time than any other in the history of the world. No other race has ever fought.
I'm gonna just stop it right there because he's a fucking idiot. That guy.
Yeah, I was just like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I just realized I have the same microphone as Rush. It's just not.
Wait,
not
that
gold.
automatically means in some people's minds that you're a Rush Limbaugh supporter.
Well, that's you know what?
Start the conspiracy.
This microphone, Z, is made by Rode, which is an Australian company that is a family-owned business that is Australian-owned and manufactured. So, you know what? If you want to be like Rush, support the Australian economy, buy his microphone.
That's the only thing. That's only just buy the microphone. Besides that, he's all trash. Salute
Chop,
to the chat.
salute. I'd love to see Chop. That's Chop. That's Supreme System Lord's Chop. Get him.
Oh, okay. No,
Chop.
Chop. He was on here earlier. He's in the back chefing up.
Okay. Is he cooking for us?
Yeah.
So neoliberalism ends in 2008, but it really is, politically not a viable option by 2015, let's say. And so we have this Clinton-Trump race, and Trump wins. And that signifies the absolute final nail in the coffin of status quo politics.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move into the second phase of what is, I mean, look, Haiti is a disaster and the Clintons absolutely. But the problem with that is then you get into this whole Pizzagate conspiracy about how there was child trafficking in Haiti led by the Clinton family, which I can't definitively say didn't happen, but I can say it's very unlikely that it happened. I think the Clinton Foundation did a lot of harm in Haiti. And I think the links to Jeffrey Epstein are pretty egregious and paint a very dark picture. But that does not mean the nation was systematically stealing children in Haiti for pedophiles in the US. I can't say that, right? You can connect the dots that way, and it seems logical. But I cannot go that far with you, other than to say more info is needed.
What we could say and what is factual is that policies that the Clinton administration, going back to the 90s and even pre-Clinton down to Bush and even to Reagan, going back ever since Haiti abolished slavery, the United States has systematically targeted that part of the island by backing, the Dominican coups over and over and over again. And I don't want to disrespect anyone in the chat who's Dominican or come from the island, but you have to understand history. The U.S. backed and so many attempted coups to destroy Haiti for the simple fact of Haiti got rid of its slaves. I mean, got rid of its slaveholders.
Well, no, and it's a revenge against the Black Jacobins and it's the same reason why, Jeff Bezos is paying consultants in the Besna, Alabama warehouse, hundreds of these consultants, $3,800 a day, to convince people earning $60 a day that they shouldn't unionize. Right.
That right there should be like a scratching.
But it's the same reason. It's like if we allow the history and legacy of the Black Jacobins of Haiti to be known and to be understood, then our systems of oppression through white supremacy will crumble because it's a house of cards. And so we have to keep our foot on the throat of any competitor before they are strong enough to compete. And in the case of Haiti, we have to punish them because we didn't move fast enough to prevent it from happening. And so we have to, look at Cuba, look at Venezuela, look at, Eastern European countries.
Trinidad, Tobago. Yep, Eastern European countries.
If you want to know, like, here's the thing I don't get either. It's like neoliberalism is supposed to be this centrist politics. It's Milton Friedman's politics. It's the School of America's out of the Chicago School. And I might catch, but go back and read chapter 9 of Democracy in Chains by Nancy McLean and read about how consistent the governance style of Pinochet in Chile was with the stated goals of the neoliberalists of the era. So, of course it is completely consistent, right? In terms of the ways in which the US foreign policy has sought to exploit people, but the domestic side of it ended in 2015. And for a lot of different reasons, Trump was able to make an absolute mockery of the Republican Party. And indeed, because of Roger Ailes, Rupert Murdoch, and Rush Limbaugh, this kind of strain of US conservatism,
the media empire,
coupled with your Jim Bakers and televangelists pumping up, doing these pump and dump voter schemes with playing with the minds and hearts of the evangelical communities across America.
That's why whenever we talk about it, like Republicans, they would never make abortion illegal for the simple fact that is a main talking point and something they use around election time to rile up the base for evangelicals. But like
Hector, the inverse is that is true as well. Legislatively, tomorrow, right? Let's say Ilhan Omar, the squad, AOC, whatever, Jemma Paul, whoever, right, could come on with a bill that says abortion is a human right. It is a medical situation. We are going to fund this through fucking Cobra, right? If you want, who cares, right? But we are going to make it a legislative issue that women should have access to safe and efficient abortions without any kind of thing, but they don't, and they don't, so that they can also engage in this argument.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The kind of center left is always kowtowing to the extreme right because they're trying to find a compromise, because they're afraid of not being bipartisan in whatever capacity. And Murdoch has made an absolute mockery of that in 3 countries. Not just America, Australia as well. I mean, Scott Morrison.
How much does Rupert Murdoch own for the Australian of the Australian media, so people can understand?
Nationally, it's 70%. So imagine if 70% of the media in America was Fox News, which maybe it is. But that's what it is. And then you got states like Queensland, which is similar to kind of like temperament, I guess, in terms of how the abused of our societies fall into these traps, because these traps offer comfort and they allow you to channel that rage towards something. So, the downtrodden and going back to Joby Peterson in Queensland and this kind of nonsense deregulation, let's open up everything to the mining oligarchy to come in and extract all of our natural resources and
creating small little mine towns where the owner of the mines own like the drugstores and the pharmacies, and didn't pay you in US dollars. They paid you in their company dollars, which trapped you. But it's trapped. But it was literally like 30-40 years ago, and there's actually attempts on that happening in Nevada. You got tech companies that are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, but at the same time in Nevada, you've got the Bernie caucus who have taken over the party. So
no,
who knows,
right?
So it's not as simple as just one side is dominant. There's always defense. Sometimes it's a full press and it's obvious. Sometimes it's a half-court press and you don't see it as clearly. Sometimes it's man on man.
Best defense is the best. Best offense is the best defense sometimes.
Yeah, well, any championship offense is built off a championship defense, and we know that, right? You gotta be playing the backboard at the back end of the court, right? You need to be catching those rebounds, otherwise you're going to find yourself less than 500, right? Whatever it happens to be. So, you know, it is obviously politically unviable by 2015. Trump comes in, is able to leverage all of the bullshit, right? Because he is the ultimate, you know, you can't polish a turd, but you can absolutely roll it in glitter. And I've never seen a shinier piece of turd rolled in glitter than Don Jr. But that is because he watched his dad roll himself in glitter for 40 fucking years on national TV doing ads for Pepsi and McDonald's.
You mean spray tans?
I mean, like, whatever gets the job done, right?
I try to add some humor.
He was
That's what I do.
rolling around in Cheetos glitter. That's what he was doing.
Well, I
that's
guess
the new Cheetos.
If you're so white that you want to be a person of color, I guess orange is a color you can go for, right? And soon, I hope that the orange of the face will match the orange of the jumpsuit, right? That's all we can hope for here.
Yeah, that's all we can.
But the problem with Trump is that he was the dark impulse of this kind of rejection of neoliberalism, of just rage and hate and bitterness and resentment. And, you know, that element is something that's, you know, Jordan Peterson was able to capitalize on as well.
It's fake populism. It's when you start pulling at the strings of what people fear. When you start talking about, oh, you're in the middle of the country, you don't have a job, you're poor. Well, it's because, you know, people are crossing the border. Oh, you're in the middle of the country, you don't have a job. Well, that's because we're allowing all these Muslims to come in. You know, so when you run on fake populism, he ran on building back like the manufacturing industry, when under his administration we lost more manufacturing jobs than anything else. You know,
he was trying to take credit at the end of 2016 after he won the election, but before he was inaugurated, for work that Obama had done with Apple to bring back some measly amount, like 400 jobs or something. And he claimed credit for that. He said, this is something I have done. I've already fulfilled my promise. I'm not even in office. And that was the level of bullshit dealing with.
And just so Zach knows, just to be transparent, the same amount of energy I have towards Trump, I will have towards Obama as well. Because when you look at the housing crisis that happened, what led to that was Bush's tax cuts that he implemented. When they were about to expire, they could have expired in 2010. Obama and Biden re-upped those same exact tax cuts that led us to the housing market. Wow. Yeah, they made them permanent. So if you know what led us to the housing market crash is what you just now made permanent. You know, the same thing with Trump's tax bill. People want to talk about, this tax bill. Yeah, he wrote a tax bill that helped you out for 2 years.
In 2021.
Exactly. But he wrote a tax bill as well that doubles the tax or increases the tax of the middle class Americans. So you have to talk on both sides.
Equaled 1.9 billion effective. 1.9 trillion effectively in government spending. And this is a huge problem now for the Republican Party because, you know, Ted Cruz said it, right? Or whoever, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, whoever it was, maybe it was Lindsey Graham, all of them. One of them said, if we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed and we will deserve it. I think that was Lindsey Graham.
That was Lindsey Graham.
And I mean, the reality is you pass a $1.9 trillion bill that just gives money to the 1% of the economy, right? And the economy isn't the American economy, guys. I know you guys are at the center of it and it's hard to see beyond that, but the American economy is the engine room of the global economy. And when nations cut taxes in America for the wealthiest 1%, giving them more control and power, guess what they turn around and do with that control and power? They go and colonize the digital markets and the manufacturing markets around the world. And yes, I mean, a part of that comes down to like the rise of China and all of that nonsense. But, you know, and the Steve Bannon in people's ears saying, let's go to war with China is ridiculous fucking propaganda.
The same thing with Elon Musk trying to invade Bolivia to try to get the resources from Bolivia.
Coup whoever we want to coup, right? Because we need your lithium. And Evo Morales is like, you can have our lithium.
You can pay us.
Yeah, you can pay us. And guess what? We're going to use that money to build our lower club. We're going to pull people out of poverty with that money. You want Tesla cars on the freeway on the Pacific Freeway going from LA to Malibu. You want to drive a Tesla that drives itself, then you have to bring our people out of poverty. You have to allow us to instill literacy programs and you know, And you look at Cuba, right? Look at what Cuba's response to the global pandemic. I wonder where we would be if it wasn't for Cuba at the very beginning, like a year ago, when Cuba was sending flights of doctors to Spain and Italy.
Cuba sends to this day, over the past 30, 40 years, they export more doctors to other countries than any other country in the world.
And so what happens if you create a free higher education system?
More
What
doctors.
happens? More doctors, more engineers, more poetry writers, more filmmakers, more statisticians, more
people in the arts.
thinkers.
Just like
How do you fund free education?
There are many different ways to fund it, right?
I'm just posing questions.
No, of course.
Disagree.
Yeah.
It's a good question, Zach.
Say, like, for instance, there's several ways to go about it. One way that I always point to, say, like, our energy infrastructure, when it comes to like our energy sector. Say, like, for instance, the power company. Like, if we had a national power company that the United States government or state operated, that wasn't a for-profit business, the money that you generate from the energy company, you could use that for public schools, you could use that for healthcare, you could use that for other things. Just like Amtrak, you see, Amtrak is operated by the government. It makes a profit, and that money from Amtrak is used for like the post office. Money from the post office is used for other parts, for like the railroads, for the roads and bridges. It's just so it's not making it a for-profit and privatizing the profits.
Yeah, well, that's the key, right? Because the money gets spent either way. We think about the homeless issue, or we think about like behavioral issues, right? Why are people, like you were mentioning, people in Appalachia, parts of kind of the rural, middle, decimated parts of the country, where we have people who have not only intergenerational poverty, but because they live in a small town where there's no growth and no jobs, the young people leave that town in droves, leading to communal intergenerational poverty. And then the Sackler family comes in and says, oh, did you break your back digging out that mine? Here's some opioids. They're only going to addict 1% of the prescribed people. That's bullshit. So now you got a heroin epidemic, and now you've got firefighters going around with the Narcan to revive people who probably don't really want to be revived, right? And so
as somebody who worked EMS, those were always the scariest calls to get, because you don't know how people are going to act. They're passed out on the floor, and once you hit them with that Narcan and they jump right back up, they want to whoop your ass because you just wasted their last $10 or $20.
Right, but additionally, right, it's also the fact that someone is paying for that Narcan. Right now, instead of funding the Sackler family to promote their pharmaceuticals and their non-addictive opioids, what if that money was put into a national health service, like in Australia or like in the UK, where we were paying for it on the front end, where people actually got the benefit of that money, rather than then going out and sending a SWAT team to find the guy who bought the $20 worth of heroin, arresting him and putting him in prison, where that same money, the same amount of money, or maybe slightly more money, is being spent, but now it goes into the pocket of the guy who owns the private prison. Right, so it doesn't where you spend the money, the same amount of money gets spent. It's just does it get spent in the private sector, or does it get spent in the public sector? Right.
When you look at like pharmaceuticals and like in advancement within like a modern medicine or whatever, all of that is funded by our tax dollars. Like Tylenol, all these like all these drugs. All the research and development that goes into it is all publicly funded. It's just when the point that after it's made, it gets patented and then it's sold for profit. So me and you, Zach, our tax money is going to pay for that, but we don't benefit from it. It's just like like
you're extorted for it. You have to pay $300 for one thing of
insulin. When you go to Canada, the same insulin, the same company that makes it, the same insulin is $20 in Canada, but it's because how the government set it up. It's a national health service. It's not for profit. So we have to look at our like society and recognize that like a cell phone is a commodity. This is a commodity. I don't need this to live. But healthcare, that's a necessity. You know, having some place to live is a necessity. So when you talk about like housing as a human right, you talk about decommodifying the housing market. So that way it's more owned publicly. So the private interest of it can't jack up the rent and make the rent 13, 14, 1500 in New York City. You know, majority of renters, like people nowadays in the United States aren't having kids because we can't afford that shit. You know, because the average cost of having a kid is anywhere from 10,000 for the medical bills, and then you add on everything after that. It's expensive as hell, and it's hard when you have Americans living paycheck to paycheck. When 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck.
Do you know how much it costs to have a baby? Like to go into a hospital and have your OBGYN and your other doctors, you know, in the surgery room to deliver a baby. Do you know how much that costs in Australia? Zero. Nothing. And do you know how much it costs to hold your baby after you have given birth in America?
Oh, in America. Oh,
just to hold your baby, just
20
for like a
to
minute.
30 grand.
No, just the line item fee to hold your baby for a minute before they take it off to swaddle it and clean it. It's like $100. Just that one line item, just holding your own baby that was inside your body that you have just gone through a very painful situation to deliver that baby. And then the doctors charge you, or not charge you, charge your insurance company $100 as a line item because you held your baby, right? I mean, that's goddamn ridiculous. That is pure rent seeking and extortion and mafia shit, if we're being honest about it, right?
And then when you look at like like a public option or just Medicaid for all, people say, oh, it's going to cost so much right now. But the amount of money that we spend right now, if everyone was to have it, that's like, they said like numbers say like, Zach, me and you, we'll probably pay $800 to $1,200 in our taxes a year on, you know, universal health care. But you know what you pay privately, monthly and yearly for your health care that you got through your job. That can average anywhere from $2,500 to $2,800 a year. So you ask somebody realistically, would you want to spend $2,500 to $2,800 a year for limited coverage? You don't, you know, you have limited vision coverage, limited dental coverage. God forbid you go to vacation in Florida, you break your leg, then you go to a hospital that's not in your system, you get charged $20,000, $30,000 for that. Would you rather that, or would you rather pay $800 to $1,200 and have access to everything? Dental, vision, eye care, doesn't matter where you at, you have access to every doctor. When you start speaking to people like that, they tend to like, you know, open their mind more. Then it's like, oh, but I don't want to trust the government. But you don't want to trust the government, but you rather trust a private business that's ripping you off. Makes no sense.
And not just a private business in America, but a multinational, right? All these insurance companies are multinational and they're moving money around all over the place. You know, in Australia, we have Medicare, right? And Medicare, you get like a card, it has your name on it. Well, you start on your parents' card, and then when you turn 16 or 18, you get your own card. You go to any doctor that bulk bills, right? It's not every doctor. You've still got private doctors in Australia who charge you $80 a visit, even if you just need a, you know, Tylenol prescription. But, you know, you go to a doctor that bulk bills, they swipe your Medicare card, and that's the end of it, right? And then we have private insurance on top of that, right? So if you go to a hospital, if you go to a doctor, if a doctor comes out to do a house visit, or you call up nurse on call, all of that is covered by Medicare. But if you want, and if you need to get your eyes checked for your vision, that's also covered by Medicare. But then Medicare stops at that point, right? And we don't have dental coverage by Medicare unless it's a you know, almost a life or death situation. So if you want glasses, you need private health insurance, right? But because of our system, what ends up happening is we end up with this situation where I pay 800 Australian dollars a year to have private health insurance. I get another card, which would be like my Australian Unity card. I then go to a company that makes glasses, and I will get on my health insurance, I'll get $200 a year out of my 800 that I contributed, 200 of that straight back every single year to go and buy glasses. And so these companies that sell glasses do these bulk deals so that I can get a 2-for-1 frames and lenses for $200, 2 pairs of glasses every year for $200. And I've already paid for that through my private health insurance on top of my Medicare, right? So my $800 goes an awful long way, right? And that's on top of what I pay. Now, in terms of taxes, we pay, when we register a vehicle, we might pay $800 for that vehicle for that year. That's a huge amount of money, right? Where does that money go? So about 150 to 200 of that 800 goes to administration fees and database fees and all the rest of it, like the people who actually produce the license that goes on your car, the physical license, all that, plus the car, plus the people to operate the camera booth where you get your photo. Then we pay about $600 in something called TAC, right? And the TAC is a kind of, it's socialized, right? We all pay into it. We don't have a choice. It's mandatory. You must pay into it. And, you know, the sovereign citizens hate it, right? In Australia, the sovereign citizens absolutely hate it because they're like, well, you should only have a license if you're traveling for commercial purposes. But, you know, everyone has to have this license, and this license has a $600 tax on it that goes to the TAC. What does the TAC do? TAC ensure that anybody in a car accident on an Australian road, whether they are a car accident or they are just incidentally involved in that car accident, can go to hospital, buy ambulance, and have major surgery if necessary, minor surgery, get support when negotiating with their boss about taking time off and still getting paid, right? Again, even if they cause the car accident, because everybody's contributed $600 a year to this major fund so that, you know, serious emergencies can be dealt with in the same way that, you know, a fire is dealt with. So all of that is really important. It's not about socialism. It's about a mixed economy. You're never going to have socialism in America.
No.
But what you need is a mixed economy. And to be honest, maybe socialism is a full, you know, fully automated gay luxury communism maybe is an awesome utopia to envisage and work towards. But, you know, until we get there, let's just chip away at a couple of things and develop a mixed economy.
Mhm.
So that one good thing in 2015 of Trump ascending to the RNC and the nomination for president and then becoming president is that it absolutely ended the decrepit nature of neoliberal politics that had reigned for the past 35 years up to that point, 40 years up to that point. Now, everything bad about Trump, we already know. He, you know, already we had hate groups go up 700% under Obama because he was black, and people felt they needed to fight that with, you know, militia groups and hate groups. And then that went up again under Trump, but Trump normalized it and gave voice to it. So now we have, you know, casual racism on the rise again. We have Breonna Taylor being killed with no kind of consequences. George Floyd, the same thing. And now we get back to Biden, right? And Biden wins in a nail-biting election that was like too close for comfort.
Yeah, it was like wasn't it like 60,000 votes that just shifted the election, or even less than that?
No, well, I mean, it depends how you're telling it, right? Because it's different states. Like, what was the vote count in Wisconsin or Michigan or Indiana?
No. Yeah, there was like one. Those was like 5. The next one was 7. So a combination of all the states, like the swing states, like he won only by swinging just 60,000 votes
in the swing states. But if you
in the
add
swing
in like
states
California
combined.
and New York, he won by a
yeah,
popular
definitely.
vote was like 7 million ahead, right?
Mhm,
So clearly there's a majority that wants Joe Biden. But that issue aside, what Biden, Delaware Biden, said to a room full of executives, nothing will fundamentally change, right? Then Scranton Biden, who you know comes out as president and says we need to end trickle down economics. Well, that's a fundamental change. So yes, he lied about the $15 minimum wage. Yes, he lied about the $2,000 stimulus checks. Yes, he lied about a few things. And already, you know, in the first 60 days of his presidency, he's broken several major promises, which is very concerning. But then
politicians do.
Yeah, but then he's also broken promises to his donors. He's broken the promises that he made to the donor class as well. there's a consistency in him breaking his promises, which is interesting, and we don't normally see that. We definitely see broken promises, but we don't normally see the kind of comparative, broken promises to both
saw
groups.
the donor class get upset when his nomination for health and his health chief or his health advisor, whatever the title is, got rejected by the Senate. And that was somebody that was for Medicare for all from California.
Hey Hector, my
What's up,
dinner's
baby?
here. My dinner's here, so I gotta go eat. But if you guys are still on, I'll be back.
Later, baby.
Love the show, bro. Everybody be
We're
safe.
looking forward to talking to you after dinner.
Yeah.
All right. I'll even be more relaxed.
Enjoy your chicken nuggets.
Hopefully Chop has cooked you up something good in the back.
Yeah.
Hopefully what?
Chop cooked you something good in the back.
Yeah, Chop got the Cheetos. You know, you had me think you got like Cheeto glazed chicken. You know what I'm saying? Peace, everybody.
Later, baby.
So, this $1.9 trillion bill that is, I mean, the majority report, Sam Cedar has done a good job of breaking it down and showing like the average family could stand to gain not just $1,400 out of this, but with various different rebates and this and that. They could stand, if a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children could get a total of like $6,000 in benefits, and that's not including what they're going to get through like refunding the Head Start program. No one is talking about the funding that's going to the Head Start program and what a difference this is going to make for eradicating child poverty and child hunger. Right, the fully funding the Head Start program, sneaking in a UBI through the child tax credit refund, which is $300, which will be paid monthly. These are major changes in the philosophy, not of government, but of governance. And I think that Biden doesn't give a shit about anybody or what anybody thinks, good or bad. He's just doing it, man. He's like, I don't have time to do what Obama did and try and court Mitch McConnell, right? I've been burnt by that motherfucker for years. I'm not going to allow him to continue to do what he's doing, right? And good for Biden.
And he has, when it came time to reining in, Senate Democrats from West Virginia, he made that phone call, and he made that dude change his mind real quick, because he's up for re-election. All Biden has to say is like, listen, none of us would campaign for you, none of us would try to help you out. If anything, we'll put somebody up to switch.
Yeah, well, let's hope Justice Democrats can work some magic in West Virginia as they have in other parts of the country. But now, look, I'm not going to worship Biden by any stretch of the imagination, right? Delaware Biden is still there. And one of the things that was pointed out about these stimulus checks is that unlike the $600 Trump stimulus checks, there's no protection for debt collection to intercept some of that money, if not all of that money.
Yeah, I'm worried about that.
Right? And the fact that, Biden has done nothing on student debt alleviation. Those two things concern me. Look, the stakes are so high, and we talk a lot about Michael Brooks because you've got Against the Web up there as a part of your mise en scène, and this copy of Jacobin on the back is dedicated to Michael Brooks. So he is spiritually with us at all times. But he wanted to win, right? And what did winning mean? Right? What did winning mean? What does freedom mean if it's individual freedom, but community freedom is abolished and it's just oppression, right? Winston was free to think whatever he wanted until he wrote those thoughts into a notebook, right? 1984, George Orwell, you know what I'm talking about? Right. So, we're free to think whatever thoughts we want. But when our environment is an unfree, oppressive environment, what use is that freedom?
I will let you.
Biden's
I'll let you answer this.
Yeah, Strom Thurmond and all that. Of course. Look, I mean, I think we have to be realistic. about what it is that we want to win. And what we want to win is a proper response to climate change. What we want to win is a proper response to inequality so that we can have some hope of a future. Murdoch wants to win too, but you know what he wants to win? He wants to win another $100 billion into his family's trust fund by committing arson around the world and supporting these different people who are lapdogs to him. Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister here in Australia, is completely only reason he is in office at all as our Prime Minister is because Murdoch can rely on him to pass the legislation that is in Murdoch's favor, right? And Murdoch's not the only one. KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, all these guys are the same. They can rely on Morrison to continue, passing nonsense rules. But Morrison has no theory of change. Morrison has no theory of governance. Morrison has no consistency. When a Labor member is accused of rape, he will go out and say, we need a full investigation. It's not just because the police have closed the book on this doesn't mean we should close the book on this. This is a political issue, blah, 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 blah. And when it's a Liberal member from his own party, right, his own Attorney General, who's been credibly accused of rape, then he's like, well, we have a rule of law in this country, and this is a case matter, not a political matter, and we need to focus on the presumption of innocence in this case. It's like, well, yeah, but the rule of law was broken by your Attorney General, right? I mean, like, this is so. Scott Morrison is like Trump with charisma, right? Andrew Cuomo without the charisma. Now, look, I mean, I don't think Scott Morrison has ever sexually abused anyone. He's not confident enough with women. He's the kind of guy who, rumor has it, shat his pants at Macca's after a big night drinking. That's who our Prime Minister is. Rumors. Allegedly, he did that. I don't know that that's true, but allegedly, right?
Quotes.
Quote unquote.
But to answer what Zach brought up, yeah, that's obviously this does needs to be addressed, but we're talking about Biden from, and this is not giving him any cover and excuses, but from the 1980s and 1990s, that's a totally different person than who ran for president this go around. And when you have a rhetoric, especially creating anti-Asian, anti-Chinese rhetoric, anti-Muslim Islamophobia, anti-trans, homophobia, the hypocrisy is absolutely crazy on both sides at all. And it does make me sick, just like when we point out Nancy Pelosi and the whole Black Lives Matter movement. She's not doing anything to systematically change the issues at hand.
Look, I mean, this is why we have to be wary of Biden, because that Delaware sensibility, that the inertia of his career, which has been extremely racist, has been marked and remarked by white supremacy that for him to maintain his position in the Senate, that is there. And just because he was a loyal vice president to Barack Obama, which, look, that goes a long way, but that doesn't eliminate being partners with Strom Thurmond and, doing work to maintain segregation for a narrow political gain. So, I don't think it's so much that he's changed his views. And I am very wary of that. And I think the kind of systemic racism that pervades his administration is still there. Look, he's not the man. He is not the man to defund the police. He is not the man to bring equality between the races. At best, he may bring unity in the sense of the goal. And that's all we can hope for. Right.
And then, like, when you have Biden supporters, and I understand what Zach is saying, when you have Biden supporters that are quiet, when it comes to the children at the border, it's the same issue that's going on. It's kids being separated. It's the same issue. If you're not saying anything about it on the Biden, then you didn't give a fuck about it when it was going on the Trump. And right now as well, like we was talking about a couple of weeks ago, the number one people that are being deported right now under ICE and under everything going on is Haitians. Haitians and Africans are being deported right now more than anybody under this COVID emergency guideline, and it's utter hypocrisy if no one's talking about it. That's why, you know, it's a fundamental difference between like Nick, myself, and like a mainstream Democrat or like someone who votes for Biden.
Well, I think had I had the opportunity to vote in the most recent US election, Hector, I would have voted for Biden.
No, but what I'm talking about, like when it comes to like campaigning and like choosing Biden over Bernie, is what I'm saying.
Well, look, I mean, Scott Dworkin comes to mind, right? Scott Dworkin is a celebrant of Biden and Biden administration, and you know, is a strong believer of that PMC, toe the centrist line. The theory of politics is true, and communists and fascists are the same, which is bullshit. It's not. They're not the same. Like fascists have an ethos of extermination. And that's what it is, right? And whether you see that in the first few hints of the words of Mexicans are sending us their rapists and some, I guess, are good people, or you see it in the final form of 1945 Dachau liberation by the Allied troops, it's the same spectrum. And what we can say about Biden is he is not on that spectrum. Biden is not a fascist. He's not a communist. He's not a socialist. He is a Democrat in a Democratic Party that has been marked by neoliberalism. You know, since the Johnson, you know, Johnson's Great Society and Johnson's War on Poverty cost the Democratic Party the southern states, and they did not recover from that until Clinton, really. Right, you had Carter, but Carter was marred by the end of Keynesianism, really, in the 70s, and that opened the door for the Reagan administration. And the Reagan administration has dominated politics ever since on both sides of the aisle. Obama praised Reagan, Clinton praised Reagan, and Biden has praised Reagan as well. But he said in the kind of response to the $1.9 trillion relief package that he signed, he spoke about trickle-down economics not working and how we need to build an economy again from the ground up. That's a change. That's a fundamental change, not in the rules, but in the interpretation of the rules, right? When
the narrative,
right? But when is a flagrant foul a flagrant foul? Right? Is it a flagrant foul if LeBron does it? You know?
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a change in the rules, it's a change in the interpretation of the rule. Right? Speaking of LeBron, just as a quick tangent, I mean, he doesn't need to remake Space Jam to prove he's the greatest basketballer of all time.
Space Jam 2 doesn't need to be touched. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Man.
No, but to go back to what we were talking about, well, I get it, Zach. We absolutely believe there's not one man who's going to be able to do it. Like, even if Bernie won, like you and I could both be realistic. If Bernie won the presidency, he's not going to come in and just automatically take his socialism shotgun and start shooting socialism pills all over the place, or, you know, Medicare for all pills all over the place. No, it takes like you said, it changed a change in the narrative, a change in the conversation. Just like Biden coming out and saying that trickle down economics that hasn't worked and hasn't been working since the 80s. That's been something that even Democrats, when going against Trump, one thing they kept saying is, "Oh, I wish we could go back to an old Reagan style of, you know, of conservatism, a whole Reagan era of conservatism," which was utter bullshit. You know, Reagan was just a diet version of Trump.
No, it's even worse than that, Hector. Reagan was a diet version of Barry Goldwater, right? I mean, go back and study. Like, there's that Reagan documentary. Well worth watching. I mean, the guy was a vapid but very good political speaker. He was an excellent actor. Now, not in Hollywood. He was a terrible actor in Hollywood, but he was an excellent actor when it came to the political stage. He was someone who was able to polish the edges of Barry Goldwater's openly hostile racist message. That is what is the politics of Barry Goldwater? It is segregation.
Mm-hmm.
It's out and proud segregation. It's out and proud. We should be allowed to say the N-word. Words, maybe they have consequences, but we should be immune from those consequences. And who cares if we oppress women because they belong barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen? Right?
Yeah,
that's the attitude of these patriarchs. And Biden is a patriarch, and guess what? Bernie is a patriarch. Right? You think if Bernie was president, that he wouldn't cop the same kind of hate from socialists that Biden is copping? Of course.
of
He
course,
would. Right?
of
But the
course.
thing is, you have to educate the public, and that means you have to do things that deliver the benefit to people who are acting in bad faith and refusing to acknowledge the potential of the benefit. So you have to show them a concrete example. Here's a bridge, right? It was falling apart. We used public money, and now the bridge is sparkly and new. Here's a hospital. It was dilapidated. It had insufficient beds. We've used public money, and now it's shiny and new with more than enough beds, right? Another COVID comes. Even if we don't handle it quickly enough, we've got enough beds. We've invested in that. Right? Here's an education system, whether it's Head Start, whether it's reducing student loan debt. I mean, a part of me is hoping that the reason that Biden is reluctant to tackle student loan debt at the executive level is that he wants to signal to, say, the squad to level up their power, their political power, and their political capital, pushing through a bill legislatively that is not only going to help it alleviate the debt strain of young people and older people, like we're talking people in their 50s who still have $35,000 worth of student debt from 25 years ago, right? And it's just accruing and accruing and accruing, and they're struggling to even just pay on the interest, let alone the capital on those student loans, while banks are leveraging that money 10 to 1 and funding these big projects like in Puerto Rico to build luxury, not even hotels, luxury apartments that, where there's a horse sanctuary.
Yeah, that's
so my secret wish in this is that Biden is going to be kind of open to persuasion with a reform of the entire industry. And if you reform the higher education industry in America, you automatically reform it in Australia as well, right? Because Australia is like the water skier and America is like the boat, right? We can only move in the way that the speedboat is moving. We can't move independently of it.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let me just, because we brought the gentleman's name up. So hold on 1 second if I can. Let me know if you can hear this.
Socially enlightened left tends to be stereotyped.
Yeah, I can hear it.
People who are rich, elite, quote, imperialistic crybabies who don't want to work. And so people who may not buy into socialist ideas or ultra left rhetoric, they take that stereotype, they close their ears. I've door knocked for a bunch of candidates in Massachusetts. Where are you from? I'm from Cambridge. So we're talking real liberal here, but I've door knocked. There's a lot of working class neighborhoods. I think you guys are really neighborhood too. What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, no. So exactly. I've door knocked to people, and I've presented my little spiel, and they've been like, who can I listen to you?
You're a college kid. You're rich. You don't know anything I'm talking about. Right. You don't know how I live. I throw in the little Boston accent. Maybe they give me a little bit, but they don't really want to engage with me. So what is your counter to that? Because as you sit here, when I listen to you, obviously you present a very good and easily digestible case for socialism. But someone's not going to want to talk to me about that. So how do you engage with the person that maybe is center left or maybe center and just wants to throw your ideas out the window and doesn't want to talk to you anyway?
That's tricky. Okay, so you're not talking. I thought when we were talking about the Cambridge people telling you to get off their porch, maybe that was like a little bit of a different type of voter, different type of thing than center or center left. So let me just make a distinction also between ultra left rhetoric versus actual programs. So one of the things, I don't like ultra left rhetoric of any kind.
Well, so
sorry.
Well, so I was saying, I wasn't contesting ultra left programs. I was just saying the rhetoric turns people off. I listen to the idea.
So that's the part I completely agree with you. I think you're totally right, and I think that there is a lot of. I think that there's a lot of real problems with how people communicate these ideas. I think they're really limiting. I think they, as I said in the beginning, I said I want to be the pre-mainstream. I don't want to be a subculture. So I see people sometimes, they go, yeah, we're going to go out there and, I'm going to terrorize people with now quotes. I don't know, what are you talking about, right? And I think that part of that honestly does actually, that stereotype of, effete liberal or whatever, that has a lot of origins behind it. There's problems with that, obviously. But it's a problem that the left has basically for decades been essentially only on college campuses. That's a huge problem. That's a problem. There's a specific type of social training. There's a specific type of rhetorical strategy that doesn't work on those people. That's another thing that why I really would strongly distinguish between social habits and rhetoric versus substantive rights. You see this in groups. If somebody came to a group and said, I'll help fight for Medicare for all with you guys, but I don't want gay people here, we would say, no, you can't. No, we don't do that, period. Now, if somebody comes in and they say, hey, I want to work for Medicare for all with everybody in this group, and I thought this Bill Burr podcast was pretty funny. And somebody's like, wait, we need to process that for 15 hours. Disaster. Alienating, embarrassing, weird, not helpful. So I would make a very clear distinction between program and rhetoric. And I think also, by the way, the socialism word, back to your guys' concerns about Bernie winning, I'm hoping that Bernie talks a hell of a lot more about FDR than socialism over the next couple of months. I'm hoping that Bernie goes to those older folks and says, look, you can't get away from the word. I'm someone who cares in the long term about that word because that's my political program. But if I was in my imaginary life, I wouldn't have to deal with that word either. However, we will. And so if he says, it's pretty simple. I'm trying to finish the New Deal. FDR talked about the 4 freedoms. That's my package. I've done that anecdotally with older voters. They go, oh, well, FDR is good. So Lula, I'm not saying to talk necessarily about President Lula to average swing-voters. That guy, but that being said, no, but honestly, what's funny is that I know people through covering him, a former president of Brazil, a political prisoner. Guys come up to me at live shows who are like, look, they're into my shows, so they're into politics, but they're definitely not part of any type of college, academic, whatever. That guy's cool. I follow him on Instagram. The pictures of him playing soccer are awesome. You read his interview, watch my interview with him. He's talking about how people buy beer. I had a program so people can get, buy a cup of coffee. When they buy coffee, I'm not doing it justice, but he's speaking. And I think that's another thing. You're talking about somebody who rose up from being impoverished, illiterate metal worker who lost a finger, never went to college, and then became the most popular and effective president of Brazil's history. And is brilliant statesman. He wasn't trained in one of these institutions. Now, it's not black and white, of course. People come out of these institutions for great leadership. We're not trying to be.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah. God, I miss Michael every day. Huh?
Yeah, man.
You know, but we have to stride on in his legacy and his shadow and continue that effort. And look, I obviously completely agree with what he's saying there. Maybe I disagree a little bit around, like, you know, being afraid of far left rhetoric, in the sense that, you know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, we can have a vision for the ultimate end game while we're fighting the you know, the battles as they're before us. But I think that the crafting of public rhetoric in particular is important. And as someone who has spent a lot of time in sociology, it's not enough to identify your fam, right? People talk about find your fam, right? And we you and I have found each other as a part of that family thing.
Give me a hug, baby.
Which is awesome, which is great. But what do we do about, you know, the guys down the street who have, you know, who have intolerable views towards women, right? Maybe they're not rapists. Maybe they're not even guys who commit sexual assault or anything like that. They're just misogynists. And they just think it's funny to laugh at the misfortune of women, and they think that women in the workplace is a bad idea. And they listen to Joe Rogan, and they want to drive a muscle car, and they want to drink beer or spirits, and they want to play, you know, Call of Duty. Like, they're not our enemy, right? And I think our politics needs to have a strong view of redemption, and a strong view that everybody is redeemable, even Trump, right? Even Trump. You know, and you know, even to the extent of Hitler. Like, these people who are promoting this stuff, you know, like your Ali Alexanders, your Gavin McGinnises, your Lauren Southerns, you know, Stefan Molyneux, these people are deeply hurt. These people are scarred. These people have suffered, and they've gone out into the community and they've realized that nobody is there for them, right? When they say, I need help, not even the Good Samaritan is coming to help them, right? And what do they see instead? They see Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, right? Because they're public facing, or maybe they're a little bit smarter than that, and they see Charles Schwab at the World Economic Forum running Davos or whatever it is, right? But what do they see? They see a system where the only way to get ahead is to cut the person in front of you and take their spot. And so, of course, that's going to develop and bleed into a politics of resentment rather than a politics of redemption. And so it's not about, like, do you have the bona fides to cut through cancel culture? Are you pure enough to be on our team? Are you fully on board with every single view we have? Right? You know, it's messy. It's messy. Right.
It is, and I have my reservations when it comes to Biden. You know, especially, you know, we've had that discussion of harm reduction and stuff, and to Zach's point, like, Zach came into the conversation. I love having Zach because he's from somebody in the middle. He doesn't follow politics. You know, he's not invested into politics like you and I are. You know, it's just somebody who's a sports bro, who's into cards, who watches the Knicks and the Yankees and football and stuff. So this is somebody who's very, you know, I'm not going to say like downplay his knowledge, but you know, when it comes to like the political climate change or just even understanding like economics theory of like what socialism or communism, this is somebody who's in the middle, who has like a kindergarten understanding of everything that we're talking about. So he imposes great questions.
Let me ask you a question, Hector, and Zach, if you're still in the chat, like, you can answer this as well. Don't we want a politics where Zach's can Zach, where you don't have to think about it, where you can rely on the idea that there is someone responsible who has the expertise and the relevant information to make the right decision?
Oh, definitely. But what I'm saying is it's kind of hard for for us to like try to, especially the Democrats, because the Democratic Party, the whole DNC, all they focused on the campaign was Trump's racist, Trump's racist, Trump's racist, Trump's racist. So it's very hard to get somebody like Zach or somebody in the middle like Zach who doesn't understand or fully comprehend like economic policies to back somebody specifically because his opponent is racist, especially when that same other person like Joe Biden has a history of saying some questionable stuff. So like for the people in the middle, it's like it's hard for them, and it's at fault of the DNC.
Right?
The DNC is at fault because they're the ones that are putting these candidates out. They're the ones that are causing what's going on.
Right. Okay. So look, let me bring it back to Australian politics for a second, just to kind of illustrate something. We have someone named Michael West who is an independent journalist who does some really excellent reporting. And he's been looking into, as a part of Michael West Media, they've been looking into campaign contributions, right? And they've found that the biggest donors in Australia within the rules of Australia, because we don't have a Citizens United, right? So there are actually limits to how much you can donate here. Although, how you view that is like, they were trying to do a workaround to get the NRA to donate $10 million to Australian politics to overturn our gun legislation so that Australians could own AK-47s and AR-15s. Like they were water pistols, right? Ridiculous. But what Michael West Media have found is that the big contributors donate equally to both parties, right? Equally to both parties, which means it kind of doesn't matter who you vote for. The donor class is getting what they want, regardless of the political outcome. Okay, I get that. So what do? In Australia, we have a representative parliamentary system, meaning that there are more than two parties. And so we also have preferential voting, or what you might call ranked choice voting, which means no votes are wasted. We also have compulsory voting, which means everybody. So you could say, all right, I'm going to find the Socialist Party. I'm going to find the Communist Party. I'm going to find the Green Party, the Sex Party, the Family Party, whatever. There's a million different parties out there. And I'm just going to hope that, by the time the Labor or Liberal Party get my vote, because eventually they're going to, that they recognize and they hear us, that we're not satisfied with their policy platform, that they need to change. And that if they don't, eventually these parties who right now are giving you their votes because they didn't get enough on their own, will get enough on their own. And then you're going to lose seats, and then you're going to be out of power. Right. And that's the hope. But in reality, that never happens. So you got to dance with one of these devils, right? Michael was talking about Lula in that clip, but who was Lula's vice president? And it's like if Jesus was running in Brazil, Judas would be his running mate, right? If not, the devil himself would be his running mate. So, it's the same here. But when you look back and you look at what the party in power actually did in terms of long-term structural governance, the Democratic Party, the Labor Party always have a slightly better record, and that slightly better record is the difference in millions of people, both in your country and mine, not going hungry, not being tipped into poverty. Every time the Republican or the Liberal Party is in power, there's more austerity, there's more punitive approach to penalization of people on welfare, because they are the problem in our society, not the people who own the mines, not the people who own the banks, not the people who own the accounting firms. It's the poor, and the poor are the problem. And so, at the end of the day, yeah, both parties are rubbish. All politicians are trash. And it's a process that has been corroded and corrupted over many, many years, if not since Athens and the invention of democracy. But, fundamentally, materially, tangibly, even if Biden is racist and incapable of solving the race problem, which I don't believe. I believe in redemption, and I believe that Biden is redeeming himself as president and has done so far. But even if, right, it's still better. Ultimately, people's lives will materially improve around the world. Those kids who are in cages, it's a step up from kidnapping children from their parents at the border. It's a step up. These are actually unaccompanied minors. Still wrong. It's still morally repugnant. It's still ethically charged and bad behavior to put children in an adult correctional facility with staff who are not trained to deal with children. But it is better. It is a step in the right direction. And if that's all we can hope for, then at least we're getting that, right? And
No,
that's important.
I agree to a point that it is better, but you know, it is better to a degree, but it's still being used as cannon fire to be like, well, look what you're doing. You know, if there's a situation that we could alleviate but by not having them in cages, you know, and
But that's
and
not
that
me,
has
Hector. We have to do that. We
no,
have to fight.
exactly. But what I'm saying is that, you know, we can say that, you know, because you and I both know, yeah, it is a step up and better, and you and I will continue to fight to get rid of it. But the mainline person is just going to see this as, oh, well, it's better, and that's it. No, the conversation shouldn't stop at that. It should be, all right, this is better than what it was, but it needs to continue to get better, and it shouldn't even exist to begin with. You know, like it may be like the Democrat Party and, like you say, the Labor Party may have intentions or may have policies in place to make sure that people don't go hungry, and like where I live or where you live, but there's still people going hungry where we live. There's still poor people in the streets. You know, there's still poor people in South America. There's still other countries that are being exploited by the same foreign policy agendas that are still being handled from one administration to the other administration. And if we're going to be realists, we have to point that out and shine a big ass light on that shit. That's
Right,
the only way we're going to get the people in the middle to like even have a conversation.
Well, I disagree. I think, look, we're dealing with very complex machinery. And as soon as you start to point to the ideal of each outcome, then it can be very overwhelming, especially for people who are not immersed in politics in the way that you and I are. And so it's very important to establish strong boundaries around the conversation, because this is what Michael was expressing in that clip, is that the far left narrative is overwhelming for people who are not ready to hear it, right? And so you have to build a ramp. You have to
breadcrumbs.
You have to hold people's hands. I mean, look, I like to have my hand held on certain issues. We stigmatize it because the right stigmatizes it, and the right projects all this stuff onto the so-called left. You know, I remember 4 weeks ago or something we were talking about, I said, kind of out of frustration, I said to you, there isn't a left. There's different activist groups who are not aligned with a radical conservative right, you know, in the shadow of the John Birch Society run by Rush Limbaugh's ghost. Sure. And that's a majority of people, right? So that minority who agrees with the Nazis and the Limbaughs and the Alex Jones and whatever, you know, your Kevin McCarthy's and your Donald Trumps, that minority can homogenize itself and start to make active material gains in furtherance of their cause, because they're small, because they don't have the same kind of distinctions. But the left is huge. The left is very, very big. And if the far left, the radical people who have certain visions for society steeped in history and you know, whether it's a Marxist analysis or a Foucauldian analysis or a Hegelian analysis or a Lacanian analysis or a Zizekian analysis, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. These are all people who have put a lot of time and effort into thinking about their ideas. And so when they're confronted with people who are coming to this for the very first time, there's a knowledge gap, and that's frustrating for both parties. So we have to find that lingua franca. We have to find that point where we can start to agree. And then if we're in the position where we have the expertise and we've done the analysis and we've done the research, then we have to be generous with our time, and we have to be generous with our language, and we have to seek to educate, and we have to remember that there is shit that we don't know. Right? There's a lot of shit we do. You and I couldn't build an iPhone together, even if we had all the parts, right? We couldn't do it, right? You and I couldn't design a plumbing system for maximum efficiency that is completely renewable. Even if we wanted to, we could get close, but wouldn't it be better to bring in a plumbing expert, an ecologist, a geologist? Wouldn't it be better to bring in people who have spent their time thinking about that? So let's not dismiss the far left, but let's recognize that they have a set of expertise that they have had to dedicate a part of their life to get, right? Like a doctor has, like an engineer or a lawyer has. And maybe we don't agree with everything they say. And maybe they don't even agree with each other on everything they say if they call themselves the far left or not, right? It's kind of irrelevant. But there are people with expertise. There are people with vision. And if they're willing to back up their vision with evidence and analysis and interpretation and sophistication, then there's a spot for them to make their case. And, is that spot when you're knocking on doors? No, it isn't. Right. And just because they have that expertise, and through that expertise, they've discovered that someone like Bill Burr has made statements that reflect in his audience and become very misogynistic and lead to men's rights activist groups doing kind of nonsense and abuse towards women and children. And so you can draw that direct line between, Bill Burr and domestic violence. Doesn't mean that Bill Burr is advocating domestic violence, and it doesn't mean that every single person who listens to Bill Burr is going to act on it in a way that produces domestic violence. And so, this is the cancel culture shield that the right wing wants to put up in order to cover all their bad behavior, and then use that shield to bludgeon the left into purity politics. And it's messy. It's messy. Say that guy who wants to come and help us fight for Medicare for all, but he's deeply homophobic. Let's park the homophobia just for a minute. Let's just park the homophobia and let's use the allies we have in the battle that we're facing. And then, you know what? Once we've got through that battle, we're going to fucking educate you about the fact that there could be 7 billion genders on this planet if people wanted to express their gender that uniquely. Right? It clusters. Of course it clusters, and we follow each other. So there's not 7 billion genders. Potential for 7 billion genders is there. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is so wrong with when she talks about science says there are only 2 genders, male and female. It's like, you're so confused. You don't even know where you went wrong.
You don't even know
there are
between the two.
Male and female refers to sex. Chromosomes, sex chromosomes, X, Y, and XX. But even then, that's a cluster in a distribution. There's more than X, X, and XY. There's X, there's XXY, there's XYY, there's XXXY. There's all sorts of distributed outcomes within the sex spectrum. And then the gender spectrum is just cultural. It's not based in reality. There's no biology attached to it. FDR grew up wearing a dress as a child. High heels were designed and innovated for wealthy men to wear. Makeup was designed and innovated for men to wear. So, miss me with this bullshit about how gender and sex are the same and they're stuck and science dictates it. Like, fuck off. But, we can have that conversation after we're all reaping the benefits of Medicare for all. Let's prioritize what we're doing here, and let's not get sucked into, waste of time conversations about who's holier than who.
No, definitely. I agree with you on everything that you just said. And to your point that it's reactionaries, and it, like, reactionaries are going to react, and it's seeing and noticing signals. If we have like anyone who's like a family friend or somebody who's just a friend in general or a co-worker, like if you notice that they are giving off red flags, and it's like, wait, that's just a little bit questionary, speak out, reach out to them, because all it takes is just for Sargon of Akkad or somebody online to like steer them down a wrong rabbit hole. And the difference between Nazism in the 90s and the 80s and stuff, and what Nazism has morphed into this day and age when it comes to like the internet and stuff, it's back then the Nazis had chapters and they were part of different like groups and had, you know, you could trace it down to who's the leader. Now it's hard. You can't do that because when you have Sargon and when you have Jordan Peterson and when you have Steven Crowder online just spewing all this Nazi rhetoric, you can't pinpoint and say that they're the reason why somebody went into a synagogue and did X, Y, and third, even though you damn sure know that the reason why that person did it is because they've been recycling this garbage and this YouTube trash that's been right-wing propaganda on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, look, those specific examples, Sargon, Crowder, and Peterson, I'm not comfortable calling those specific people in their specific expressions Nazis. I think if you're, you know, the boys over at I Don't Speak German are well worth listening to on this topic, and they spend a lot of time listening to, you know, the Nazis who talk to themselves on the Daily Show or whatever, and the comments they make. And you're right. Like, it was in the 90s a physical environment that you needed to be in with other people in proximity, with actual physical copies of Pez, etc., etc. And that kind of peer relationship would form geographically, whereas now it's kind of uncoupled from geography. And so, you know, Crowder opens a door, but he doesn't necessarily push people through it. People still make the choice to go from Crowder to, you know, a Gavin McGuinness, who is probably a little bit closer, to a Harrison Smith, who is running, you know, the morning show on the Alex Jones network, who's just an out-and-out Nazi. Right. So I'm comfortable calling Harrison Smith a Nazi because he is clearly one, but less comfortable calling Jordan Peterson a Nazi. But I do think that we should make a distinction then between Nazism and fascism. Right. So fascism is more amorphous, and you can be leaning fascist or you can have fascist tendencies, whereas Nazism is a crystallization of fascism, is a very clear and you know, concrete ethos and ideology and political will that leads to projects of extermination. Both are dangerous, and I'm not letting, you know, your Sargon or your Jordan Peterson or especially your Steven Crowder off the hook. I think these people are snake oil salesmen, charlatans who saw a quick buck, and, you know, it was a good paycheck for them. Maybe not Sargon of Akkad. I don't think he ever broke through because he just doesn't have the charisma or the kind of, you know, media presence to be able to really, like, he couldn't tangle with Brooks in that awful interview debate.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah,
he
but
couldn't answer the first question.
With Sargon, it's, you know, I understand what you're saying, not being comfortable. It's like Sargon, you know, there's a numerous times of him like quoting eugenics or trying to use eugenics in arguments. Like, he's literally like trying to like measure, like, oh, you know, well, white people have a bigger brain than people of color. So
yeah, but what does that mean? You know, I could have a bigger brain than you. Like,
no,
when we die, they could take our brains out of our
no,
skulls
exactly.
and
You and I
measure
both know that
But-
don't mean shit. But if Sargon is a
But what about the neuro? Yeah, what about the neuro pathways within our brains? You could have a much richer neuron environment than I have, even though you have a smaller brain. It's like, come on.
I know, definitely, but you and I know that. But, you know, what I'm talking about, Sargon bringing into the argument or into the discussion of why white people are like smarter or than black people or people of color, is him literally saying that their brains are bigger.
Right, but that comes from the bell curve, right? That comes from who wrote the bell? Charles Murray. Right. And Charles Murray, I'm comfortable calling a Nazi. But here's the thing with all of that, right? The Nazis are really just a reformation of the Jim Crow era oppressive politics of apartheid in the South, right? Yeah. And you know, so there's a strong undercurrent and sort of pre-cultural context for all this stuff that exists around the world. And when you get to, and this is my thesis, once you break a certain line in terms of wealth inequality, right, most people are resilient. Most people are willing to go, all right, I've had a string of bad luck, but maybe I'll get a break, right? If I just keep plugging away, if I just keep working, I can turn this ship around and I'll be proud of myself. And you know, this job sucks, but maybe I can go out and get another job, and a couple of lateral moves might lead to a vertical lift, right?
Mhm.
You know, and we see that even in the NBA, right? You have your journeyman players who go from club to club, and then eventually they get to a club where the system works for them and they just perform, right? And that performance, not sure what's happening there. You're
Sorry, no. Somebody is like riding by in a dirt bike and it was super loud, so I just muted it.
So you know, you've got these situations where once you break that line and people start to give up hope, right? Optimism is a hell of a drug. Optimism can create reality that didn't exist before. And at the beginning of neoliberalism, the optimism that people felt in a system where we could deregulate the clunky and inefficient bureaucracies, where you've just got hundreds of thousands of yes men not critically thinking about what they're doing when people put in a government form and it gets rejected on grounds that don't even make sense. And it's like, why do we have this? Why are we stifling innovation like this, right? And then you get to the other end of it 50 years later and you're like, oh, because if we don't stifle innovation like this, then the smaller players don't get a chance and the monopolies take over and they rule everything, and then they buy the government, and then they end up in Nevada running their own special economic zones where it's full vertical integration, where workers are literally assets. You know, they're not even chattel at this point, they're machinery. Because if you compare it, right, a farmer who has chattel, which is cows, versus a farmer who has a tractor, you know, there's a certain element of like, okay, well, my tractor's inanimate. Unless I'm turning it on and driving it, the tractor's inanimate. I'm willing to work my tractor into its component parts, but I'm less willing to do that with my living cow, right? I do want to give my cow some opportunity to graze in certain pastures. Both are bad. You shouldn't own these things in this way. But when it comes to the kind of Amazon vertical integration they're going to be able to get in the, you know, radiated fields of Nevada where, you know, the B-52 bombers were testing nuclear capacity out in the desert, you know, what happens when their workers get cancer from that? Nothing, because their workers are just machines. So you just swap them out. You bring people who don't have cancer in and replace the people who did have cancer, and it doesn't matter. But it does matter because those people have families, those people have dreams, those people have aspirations. So, you know, yes, we should ignore some of the far left rhetoric, but we should maintain the far left logic of what they stand for. And then we should just guide people how far they want to go, right? And you know, your Sargons and that, I mean, they're so cheap. It's so cheap.
They're one trick pony, man, and it gets regurgitated. And honestly, but it's just so fucking hard when because I visit Reddit, you know, I go into different Discord channels and different Twitch channels and shit like that, and I've had conversations with actual like self-proclaimed like neo-Nazis, and it's fucking weird, bro. Like it's literally weird type of conversation because it's like you and I both know what our intentions are, right? You and I both know that we're trying to like start a conversation or open a gap or just open a channel, a dialogue. That's what you and I, you know, and Alex, you know, that's what we tried to create here. Alex, you know, has a study for a test or whatever. That's why he couldn't join us today. But that's what our intentions are. So it's kind of disheartening when I tried to do that. And after 30 minutes of like mental gymnastics that they try to do to try to talk a talking point or try to like why they like this better, after a while, it just turns out that they're just racist. And they literally just say, I don't care, I'm just racist. And would just literally leave the Discord chat. So after like 30 minutes or 45 minutes of like trying to have a conversation, they'll just jump around in circles, and they'll just end up that they really just don't care. And it's a little disheartening at times. I'm not gonna lie.
Right, but of course, it's more than disheartening, and it's a huge threat, right? Because once those people kind of go, I'm just a racist, and then the interlocutor goes, cool, I'm a racist too, let's be racist. And then they amplify each other up on 8kun, and then next thing you know, mosques in Christchurch are being shot at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's an effort post to prove how racist you are or whatever the bullshit is. I mean, come on. That has got to be dealt with in a swift and visible. That person has to be put on trial. Their ideas have to be reprimanded by the power, right? Otherwise, what does Thomas Hobbes tell us? Life will be nasty, brutish, poor, and short, right? In a war of all against all. And it's not going to be a war of all against all, because you're going to have warlords who form, who are able to take some advantages or are able to exploit their talents in such a way that they produce these advantages, and then the narcissism sets in, and then you have mafia bosses and warlords roving around, oppressing people on a smaller scale, but on a much more violent scale. And look at Colombia for that, right?
Mhm.
Look at Peru for that. Look at parts of Thailand for that, right? And look at the inner cities of every American city. You've got warlords there. You got warlords who are there, who are overcharging their customers, and their customers can do nothing about it. Whether they're landlords or they're bodega owners, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. You've got people with that mindset. And so what you have to do when you have an opportunity like Biden has, right? Think of it from Biden's perspective. He has to talk to every single American, right? He has to convince the Nazis as much as he has to convince the communists, from his perspective. So all he can do is educate the public by delivering, right? Actions rather than words. And so far so good on some of that, and so far not good on other parts of that. And as Zach kind of said, this isn't a job for one man, it's a job for a community. If we're going to destroy racism, then it comes through education. And a part of the reason that the reactionary right hate school, hate public education, yes, it's got a lot to do with Brown versus the Board of Education. But why are they so riled up against Brown versus the Board of Education? Wouldn't it be in their favor if they could convince every black child in America that actually Abraham Lincoln was a hero, a savior who, with a stroke of a pen, eliminated racism forever, and now everyone's singing Kumbaya?
Mm-hmm.
But they
Yeah.
fight so hard against it because they know that doesn't happen.
Keeps the systems in place. The systems that force the inequality.
People are going to ask questions. People are naturally going to ask questions. And if you start to integrate and mix with people, I mean, he said it poorly, but he said, what Trump is talking about with this suburbs comment about they're coming for your suburbs is total bullshit, because the suburbs have already been integrated. Now, that is a very bad framing. It's a segregationist framing that Zach was talking about, that we're worried about. Of course, but it's still true. There's no work to be done in that sense, so to speak. That's not entirely true, but like the overarching narrative of segregating, you go back, look at what people wrote out on the front of their houses in the 1950s and 60s. Go and look at those images, and then look at those same streets on Google Maps today. You don't see that, right? You do not see it. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, he's right. The narrative has already been lost. The reactionary right lost that argument. Now, the reactionary right lawyers and the reactionary right bankers figured out how to win that argument. I wouldn't even say, look, to be honest, bankers are not reactionary. They're just greedy. And that's not a code word for anything. I'm sorry. It's not about individuals. It's system. It's a system. The system of banking is what the problem is. And it doesn't matter who you put. You could put, Michael Brooks could become the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and eventually it would corrupt him too.
Yep,
Lula,
just like you and I.
Lula could become the CEO of Citigroup, and eventually that would corrupt him, because it's not one thing, it's the system. The bankers, I'm talking about the class of attributes that is associated with people who do banking as a part of their employment, as a part of their career. Now, once they're outside of the bank, once they turn their phone off, once they turn their iPads and all that off, and they're just sitting in their Maserati in the on the freeway or whatever, and they're no longer a banker, I don't care. I don't care what they think about, right? It doesn't matter. What I care about is how much agency do they have to do harm when they're at work. That's what I care about. I don't, as a sociologist, I really don't care that neo-Nazis exist, because Durkheim tells us that in any system of normativity, you will have a relative portion of that normativity which will be deviant, right? So in any system that is anti-Nazi, and that's the normativity of that system, you will have pockets of deviance that become pro-Nazi just because they want to fight against the normativity. I'm sorry, you cannot eliminate it. What you need to do is you need to put in serious roadblocks so that you don't change the balance where the deviance becomes the normativity. And unfortunately, under Trump, we were on a very dark path towards inverting that balance, where the deviance was being anti-Nazi and the normativity was being pro-Nazi. Just to use a kind of dumb example.
No, but it's right on the. You hit it right on the head, though.
I think, like, if we play this out, if Biden is unable to come through with material gains, tangible wins, money in people's pocket, food in people's stomachs, jobs and shelter for people, then the consequences aren't just political of him losing. If we get another Republican in the next 12 years in the White House, House, right? You know, the trifecta that the Democrats currently have by the smallest of small margins. But if that inverts and flips, kiss goodbye to the planet, right? Kiss goodbye to the planet. It's not just Keystone Pipeline that comes back on. It's let's drill in the nature of Alaska. Let's melt the ice in the Arctic so that we can open up new shipping lanes.
Let's keep
bomb
selling
countries.
let's keep selling parts of Antarctica off so people could drill.
Yeah, and let's create, like we did in Panama, let's create the Arctic Canal, right? And climate change is going to help us do that. Oh, does that mean Florida is going to get flooded? Well, guess what? If you're in Florida right now, you could just sell your house and move. People would, when climate change comes, people are just going to sell their house and move, right?
There's going to be such a big market for houses.
Oh, huge market. My
I
God.
can't wait.
Get in now. Get in on the ground floor.
I know. I'm so jealous of my father who lives in Florida.
No, honestly, Florida swampland is on a steep exponential trajectory. It's going to the moon, man. To the moon.
Oh man, before we get out of here, there was two things that I wanted to play. I'll play one of them though. Just Fred.
I'm sorry, man. I just go on whatever.
No.
Just in the moment with these conversations, I just go where they go.
So am I. Trust me. But it's this. Hold on, let me see. Yeah. Let's see if you could hear it.
So we always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary. And you're going to have to keep on saying that. You're going to have to say that I am a proletarian. I am the people. I'm not the pig. You got to make a distinction. And the people are going to have to attack the pig. The people are going to have to stand up against the pig. That's what the Panthers are doing. That's what the Panthers are doing all over the world.
We have brought to trial here Fred Hampton. You are here to judge between two conflicting testimonies. Somebody is lying. Now, reason stands, and reason is very clear here, that Private Jones, who had come from Sanford, North Carolina, would have no great desire to see Fred Hampton up in this trial. But Fred Hampton, a key figure in this community, has great reason for not wanting to be put in jail.
But the state's attorney and the state's attorney's office has reasons to see Fred Hampton in jail. We've got a new state's attorney, you see. And he said already what he thought about people that had different political beliefs than he had. His speeches sound somewhat like those of Hitler. And we know why he wants to see Fred Hampton put in jail. Why do I have a lot of arrests? Because of harassment. Why is there harassment? Because the people that harass me have set up a
problem that made me disagree with them violently, and they set up this problem in order to exploit me and other people like me. And why they want to get rid of me, because I'm saying something that might wake up some other exploited people and some other oppressed people. And if all these people ever get together, then these things that are exploiting us will be able to run into the lake. That's why they want to get rid of us. And it's just, it's sort of like a primary thing with me. I'm the first move that they'll make. I'm a part of the organization who will be the first organization they'll move on, because I happen to be a part of the organization, the Black Panther Party. That is the only organization, in fact, that has came out and stood up loud and clear, saying that we don't care what anybody says, whether they have guns or not, and badges or 18 uniforms. If whenever they step outside the bounds of legality into the bounds of illegality, then we'll blow their brains out if they're bothering the people. And what makes them mad about that? They're constantly bothering the people. Anybody that's out there for the protection of the people happens to be in direct conflict with them. What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it is that they have black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American poor Rican people of poor people of all descent. They have caught up in these movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best, we think you fight fire with water best. We're gonna fight racism, not racism, but we're gonna fight the solidarity. We said we're not gonna fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state attorneys like this and reactionary state attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions with all those people to get together and have the international proletarian revolution. Right. And that's saying all power to the people. That's saying that no matter what color you are, you're just only two classes. And that's saying there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never did anything to get this class off its back, because this is lower, this is upper. This is the oppressed, this is the oppressor. This is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fight amongst each other. And you've heard the testimony of pigs here, and you got pigs of all colors, you know that. You got pigs that are white, you got pigs that are black, you even got pigs that are black and white. Propagating the same type of madness that this buffoon Hanrahan would be propagating if he were here himself. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy, and that everybody else that's black and that wears a lot of hair on his head and hair on his face, they want to keep you thinking that he's your enemy. Why? Because if ever you would disregard him and overlook him just for a minute and throw away that question of racism and started to deal with a little logic, then there would be no one else you could attack other than Hanrahan, other than David, and other than Tricky Dicky Nixon. If you make the right decision, then the oppressed people of the world get complete satisfaction. I know you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
And that is the key to it all.
Well, I think it's one thing. When I said as a sociologist, I don't care about these pockets of neo-Nazi. Obviously, from a political perspective, I care deeply. We cannot allow those messages to be amplified. As I said, under Trump, we had the danger of the inversion of deviance into normativity, and that's a huge problem when you think about social cohesion, right? And what Fred Hampton's talking about there is the ways in which a certain form of social cohesion is prevented from developing that perhaps would naturally develop among people who recognized that beyond superficial differences, we actually have a lot more in common. And so this is a constant project. This is an ongoing project, and one that seeks to destroy any kind of bond between people who on the surface fit in different categories, right? Different demographic categories. We can't have old and young people talking to each other. We can't have men and women talking to each other. We can't have whatever beyond that, however you want to divide your demographics beyond that, we can't have them talking to each other. And so that's why when we look at, like, you know, pop culture and pop media, you have to have your silo of Tucker Carlson voters going voters, Jesus, that, let's hope that's not a
I know. I was
I was on it. I was right. I was getting there. I was building it up. I was pedaling away and then just fell off the bike. Tucker Carlson viewers have to be siloed and put up against Rachel Maddow viewers, is my point, right? And you know, why can't we have a situation where we can take seriously what serious issue is it that Tucker Carlson has with any of the policies? Nothing, right? He says, oh, who is Biden to tell us we can't see our family on Thanksgiving? Then a week later, Biden comes out and says, well, I want you to be able to see your family on Thanksgiving. So Tucker responds, well, why do I want to see my family on Thanksgiving, right?
It's reaction.
Biden shouldn't be, you know, it's yeah, but it's just antagonism for the sake of antagonism.
It's the same thing when what happened in Texas, and like the snowstorm that happened in Texas, the winter wonderland that happened. He was like, the Green New Deal this is the reason why Texas.
Yeah, it's wind. It's wind. Don't look at Antarctica, where they've had, you know, wind power generation for years now in Antarctica in the middle of the, you know, don't look there. Don't look at Greenland. Don't look at Iceland. Don't look at the northern states of America like Utah, where it snows regularly and they still have wind power up there.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, come on, buddy.
Or how about that one Georgetown, Texas, the only place in Texas that didn't lose power because they switched their whole entire energy grid to solar energy, and the mayor of that town specifically put protocols and precautions, and so what happened throughout the rest of Texas didn't happen there.
Yeah, but this is what I'm talking about when I talk about education, right? You educate the public. Okay, over time, a snowstorm comes along. Now Georgetown becomes the example. It's indisputable, right?
Yeah.
Because they withstood. So where the neo-Nazis had their little slippery slope games before about how good Texas energy and ERCOT and the grid is, and how we're states' rights off our back, you know, and they could, before the snowstorm, they could make all these slippery slope arguments, and it's kind of hard to whatever, but we educate them when we build a system that is strong enough to withstand the pressures of an adverse environment, regardless of what that adverse environment is. I know I'm being abstract, but in the concrete example of Texas, we can see that with solar power.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. I get that. But
and that's what Biden has to do. He has to educate the public, right?
Well,
maybe he can't.
To be fair, you know, I've been critical of Biden this entire stream, but you know, when it comes to just his approach with masks, his approach when it comes to like social distancing, it's a total 180 than the rhetoric that Trump had, you know, and that right there, just educating the masses, and you know, there's people that literally don't educate.
He didn't get his shot. He didn't secretly get his shot.
I know, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing though. What was Trump educating the public with?
Nothing.
Right? Because Trump no. Trump equally educated the public. He educated the public in the sense that you cannot trust any politicians. Look at me. I'm a liar. I'll lie directly to your face. You know I'm lying to your face, and I'm going to do it anyway.
But it's going to be the greatest lie ever.
Watch all these sycophants come after me and support my lie that we both know is a lie. Mm-hmm. And sure, I'm a dickhead. You know, I'm a narcissist. I'm all these things. You know that about me. I'm a scorpion. You're a frog. Of course, I'm going to, you know, stab you at the end. That's my nature. But look at all these other frogs who lined up for me to ride on their backs too, willingly, voluntarily. You can't trust them. How can you trust Ted Cruz, right? I called his wife ugly, and he then did phone banking for me. How can you, like, this is the education that Trump was giving to his people, right? That you can't even trust the most hardcore neoconservative RNC members. You can only trust me, and you can only trust me because I told you I was going to lie to you in the first place, right? Versus Biden in terms of educating, like, hey, we all want to have this year over. We all want to have this year behind us. Let's set a goal, a communal goal. Let's say we'll gather in small groups to celebrate the 4th of July, Independence Day. Why not? Let's be independent from the virus. But to do that, we need to wear masks. And what you will see is that in a distribution of outcomes, there will be some counties where that's just not going to be possible, even by the 4th of July. Right, but those counties are going to be educated into their own ignorance, in the consequences of their own ignorance. Versus, and look, that isn't to say everybody that It's very sad. It's tragic that there are people who are doing their best, who are immunocompromised, who maybe they're autistic, maybe they have cerebral palsy, maybe whatever. They just happen to live in these places, and it's no fault of their own. Community that values ignorance, and that ignorance needs to be tested. And then when we talk about educating the public, that's what we're talking about. We need to test these ignorant ideas with reality before we test them on the battlefield with guns and ammunition.
Exactly. It's you know, the same way how we want to preach democracy in a governing society, we have to want to preach democracy in the workplace as well. You don't want to just tell people, oh, it's democracy only in one part, but you have to like work on the fashion, work on the somebody who's going to control your life and tie your healthcare to your job. Like, come on, no.
And in all seriousness, in absolute all seriousness, listen, Fox News is putting out propaganda to Fox News viewers to call the Senate and reject HR1, which will become S1 in the Senate. If you're listening to this, obviously I can't because I don't have a call, but if you're in America and you're hearing my voice and it's, you know, before the time period where this is irrelevant, call your senator. Call your senator and tell them to pass S1. Tell them that this is going to make a huge difference in terms of equality for everybody across the United States. Tell them that this needs to happen. Ending the filibuster also needs to happen, and the $15 minimum wage also needs to happen. So why don't you tell them that while you're calling them? Email them. You know, blow up the switchboard, and let's not let this ignorance be the loudest voice in the right. I think that's the other thing that people get pissed off with Biden in the reflection of Biden supporters is people just want to go back to brunch and not have to think about this.
Yep.
And the people who are working hard to prevent another Trump are really handcuffed and handicapped by that attitude. And I think that's a part of it as well. But call your senators. Tell them to pass S1.
Definitely. You have to understand that, you know, I know people may feel like, oh, my vote don't count, my voice don't count, but no. We have to put fire to these motherfuckers' feet. You got to understand that it's a game that they play, and it's a chessboard that we're the pawns on the chessboard. You have to understand that these motherfuckers who are in power, and I'm sorry to keep cursing, but these people will literally rather die than give you money. Like, they would literally rather hoard everything and leave it for like their fucking cat when they die, instead of giving the ounce or like a little bit of like any kind of stretch of benefit for any poor person or middle class person in America. And to Zach's point, we all have to come together and do this communally together. We can't just, you know, put one person in power and, like you said, Nick, go back to lunch, because that's not gonna fucking solve shit. So before we leave out, I'll just you know let you get let you get a last word in before I play this song. Have a little faith in me, because we need to have a little faith.
Look. Overall, this week is a week to be optimistic. I think if you look at like the evolution of the Me Too movement, look, if I had to boil down my politics, and you said, all right, give me one formula, I'll give you any issue. I'll throw any issue at you, and I want your politics to come down to one formula. What is that formula? Right? So how are you going to judge things? How are you going to make decisions? Because it's a game of poker, and you're going to have insufficient information in every single scenario. So you cannot make an expert decision, even with quantum computing. So what is your algorithm? What is your formula, Nick? How are you going to change the world? What's your theory of change? And it's all agency. Which groups do you give agency to in particular, so that in general, everybody has more agency? Right? That's the formula. So the specifics of that formula is to ask, does this help young, poor women of color? If the answer is yes, do it. If the answer is no, trash it. So let's have a little faith. Let's focus on that. You know, this child allowance, this $300 a month, is going to make a big difference to poor young women of color. And so that's a building block that we can leverage and build upon. Let's elevate women's voices. Let's sack Cuomo, right? That's coming. Keep the pressure up on Cuomo. That you know, he's a monster and he needs to go. And unfortunately, he's going to take down his brother's cushy career on CNN. But bad luck, Chris.
Yeah.
You should have called it out earlier. Same within this country.
God don't like ugly, and that family is some ugly ass motherfuckers.
Look, I believe in redemption. So I think, Cuomo, if he wants to start redeeming himself, the first thing he needs to do is resign. Then he needs to go away for a while, right? Maybe like go away as in go away to the big house, or maybe go away as in just leave the public eye. And then when he needs to come back, he needs to, in the background, use his material for young Black women of color in a way that they get to dictate how those resources are used, whether it's his time, his money, his connections, whatever. And then he can eventually redeem himself. Look at Al Franken, right? Not perfect, but he redeemed himself. He was genuinely sorry. And that makes a difference, right? Even if you never get over the line fully in terms of redemption, going down that path makes such a difference for everybody. And unfortunately, we're going to see the same thing. So, we hope that the exposure of these bad men doing bad things continues. And in the meantime, the mediocre man doing good things needs to continue as well. And Biden's a mediocre man doing good things. So let's be optimistic. Let's have faith. We'll put the bottle of black pills back in the medicine cabinet for this week. And, we'll reconvene in 168 hours and see where we're at.
Definitely. Like you said, put the black pills away for the rest of the week. This episode is coming to a close, but I want to leave it off on a good note. So let's have a little faith.
When the road gets dark and you can no longer see, just let my love throw a spark and have a little faith in me. And when the tears you cry.
All right. Nick, my brother, I love you. I will coordinate with you during the week, and I will see you next week, baby.
Peace out.
Later, Brody. And to everyone who tuned in today on the chat, totally appreciate everybody. My guy Spree, SB Talks, my guy Chris Chang, Chop Low. Thank you so much for blessing the chat. And like I said, man, be harsh and critical towards systems in place, towards structures that are in place, but be empathetic towards people. That's all I got to say, man. Peace, love, sports, wrestling. I'm out.